Pull up a chair, friend, and let me pour you some coffee, the good kind. Percolated on the stove like my mother used to make. I've got a story that's been weighing on my heart since last winter, and I reckon it's time to share it. You see, in my 70-some years, I've learned that the good Lord works in mysterious ways, especially when we think we've got folks all figured out. This happened up in Maine, in one of those small towns where the general store still has those wooden floors that creak when you walk, and everybody remembers what your grandfather did for a living. It's about a woman named Eleanor Walsh. You might say she reminds me of my Aunt Ruth, who lived alone after Uncle Pete passed. The town had decided Eleanor's story 20 years back, but sometimes, friend, the story we think we know isn't the story at all. Eleanor's knuckles ached something fierce against her father's old walking stick, the one he'd carved from hickory back in '49. 5:47 on her Timex. Same watch she'd worn since Eisenhower was president. That pitiful sound came again, weaker than a newborn kitten's cry. She pushed through the snow, her bad hip singing that sharp song it learned after her fall last winter. 3 days since the ice storm knocked out the power. The woods looked like somebody had poured maple syrup over everything and let it freeze beautiful in that terrible way nature has sometimes. There, behind the big oak that her grandfather had carved his initials in during the Depression, Eleanor stopped breathing. Same as she had the day they told her about Robert. A wolf, not gray like the ones in her father's hunting stories, but cream-colored, like her mother's good Sunday tablecloth. The creature lay twisted under a pine branch thick as a telephone pole, the whole mess sealed in ice thick as her arm. The poor thing's ribs showed through its coat like the keys on the old upright piano in the church basement. Each breath barely lifted that massive chest. Every sensible bone in her body said, "Run." Folks in Millbridge had been shooting wolves since before her daddy's time. Besides, what would people say? They already whispered when she walked into Morrison's general store for her weekly groceries. Margaret Henley, the pastor's wife. Mind, you had said it right to her face last month, standing there by the canned goods. It ain't natural. Eleanor, living alone out in them woods at your age. The wolf's eye opened. Amber, like honey in a mason jar held up to morning light. Not fierce, not wild, just tired. The same look she'd seen in her bathroom mirror every morning for 20 years. Ever since Robert went to check something at the credit union and never came home. Her hand found the bear spray on her belt, old habit from when the bears would raid her garbage. The wolf blinked slow, and Lord help her. Was that a tear freezing on its white fur? Sweet Jesus. Eleanor whispered a prayer. Not a curse like the young folks threw around these days. The animal didn't move. Couldn't move. The smell hit her then. Sweet and wrong like hamburger left too long in the Frigidaire. That leg wasn't just trapped infection had set in. 3 days in 20 below weather. 3 nights of that killing cold. Eleanor looked back toward her cabin. A good 40-minute walk even when her hip wasn't acting up. She had that rusty hacksaw in the shed, the car Jack Robert bought at Sears back in '98. Smart thing would be to call Chief Dalton on the party line. Let him handle it with his deer rifle. The wolf made another sound, soft as her mother's last breath at County General. Eleanor got down on her knees in the snow, Lord. The sound they made, like breaking saltines. The wolf's eye followed her. "I'm coming back for you," she heard herself say. Same tone she'd used with her third graders all those years. "Don't you dare give up on me." The wolf blinked again, deliberate as an old man nodding in church. Eleanor grabbed her walking stick and hauled herself up, joints protesting like rusty gate hinges. 20 years of being the town pariah. 20 years of Campbell's soup for one. 20 years of sleeping on the left side of a double bed. And here was this creature, looking at her like it understood exactly what that kind of lonesome felt like. The sun was trying its best to break through as Eleanor reached her shed. She grabbed the hacksaw. The jack. Robert's old leather belt, the one he'd worn to Elks Lodge meetings, and that bottle of Smirnoff she'd been saving since the millennium. The trek back took longer, dragging all that equipment through snow deep as her knees. Twice she had to lean against a birch tree, waiting for the sparkles to clear from her eyes. The wolf was still breathing when she returned, still watching. "All right then," Eleanor said, rolling up the sleeves of Robert's barn coat. "Let's see what two broken things can do for each other. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story." The jack slipped on the ice. Eleanor's palm tore open on the frozen metal-warm blood for exactly 3 heartbeats before the cold bit down hard. The branch hadn't budged. The wolf's breathing had gone shallow, barely fogging in the morning air. Eleanor wiped her bloody hand on Robert's barn coat. Still smelled like his cherry blend pipe tobacco after all these years. 20 years since Chief Dalton stood on her porch, hat in his hands like his daddy taught him, asking when she'd last seen her husband. 20 years since they found First National's vault empty, $487,000 gone along with Robert Walsh. She wedged the jack under a different spot, pumped the handle. Her shoulders burned like she'd been hauling hay bales all morning. Monday through Friday, September 1975 to June 2004. That's what her teaching certificate said, still hanging in the kitchen next to her mother's cross-stitch sampler. 29 years teaching music at Millbridge Elementary, until the school board suggested she take early retirement for the good of the children. The branch creaked like the old porch swing at her daddy's house. Morrison's General still cashed her Social Security check, $1,100 a month, but young Tom Morrison always counted the bills twice, like she might slip him play money from a Monopoly game. His father, Tom Sr., owned half the town, the Texaco station, the hardware store, most of the rental properties on Main Street. Same Tom Morrison Sr. who'd played 5-card stud with Robert every Thursday night at the Elks Lodge. Another pump? The jack groaned like her knees getting out of bed. Margaret Henley's words from last month echoed, "It ain't natural, a woman alone out here." But Margaret didn't know about the notes slipped under Eleanor's door in the dead of night. "We know you have it. Thief's widow. Get out or else." The eggs, every Halloween, weren't the worst part. It was hearing the teenagers laugh, repeating what their parents said over pot roast and green beans. The branch shifted maybe half an inch. The wolf's eye widened. Eleanor grabbed the hacksaw, rust flaking against her torn palm. First pull the blade jumped like a spooked horse, skinned her knuckles raw. Second pull sawdust and ice shavings fell like dirty snow. Voices drifted through the trees. Men's voices, getting closer, coming up the old logging road her father had helped clear in '38. The hacksaw clattered against the ice, ringing like the dinner bell at the old Miller farm. Well. Tommy Morrison stepped out from behind a white pine, wearing one of those puffy orange hunting vests from L. Bean. Mrs. Walsh playing Good Samaritan to a wolf. 2 more boys emerged, the Henley boy, Margaret's nephew from Portland, and young Jake Dalton, the chief's middle son. All 3 had deer rifles slung casual over their shoulders, barrels pointing at the ground like their daddies taught them. Tommy already had that new picture phone pointed at her, one of those Samsung flip phones all the kids carried nowadays. The thing made a fake camera sound. The wolf's breathing changed faster, like a dog panting in August heat. Its eye tracked the 3 boys, a rumble starting deep in its chest, vibrating through the frozen ground. "Get back from that thing, Mrs. Walsh!" Jake Dalton lifted his rifle halfway. "Could be rabid." Eleanor stayed put, her body between the boys and the wolf. The rumbling stopped. She felt the animal's ribs expand and contract against her knee, terror breathing. Same as her students used to get before the Christmas pageant. Tommy's phone made that clicking sound again. Then again. "Boy's right," said the Henley kid, working a wad of Skoal in his cheek. "1 shot, Clean and done, doing it a favor. Eleanor's hand found the hacksaw handle. This animal's trapped and suffering. You leave it be. Tommy laughed, had his daddy's mean laugh, the one Tom Sr. used when foreclosing on somebody's mortgage. The witch protecting her familiar. Wait till everyone sees this. His fingers danced over the phone's little buttons. Eleanor could already see it spreading through town like gossip at a church supper by noon. Everyone from the Texaco to the beauty parlor would know. Please. The word tasted like pennies. Just go on now. Or what? Tommy stepped closer, his Timberlands crunching through the ice crust. You gonna put a hex on us like folks say? The wolf tried to move, its trapped leg twisted wrong, and fresh blood spotted the snow, bright as maraschino cherries. The infection smell got stronger, sweet rot like the time a possum died under her porch in July. The boys backed away. Tommy still pecking at his phone. See you around. Witch. They crashed through the underbrush like yearlings, their laughter echoing off the frozen trees. Eleanor's phone, that old Motorola flip Ruth Cooper gave her before she passed, started buzzing in her pocket. Then again, and again. The wolf's breathing had gone ragged, like her father's did those last weeks at County General. Eleanor grabbed the saw, her torn hands screaming. Pull! Push! Pull! Push! The branch cracked and shifted, but held on like a stubborn jar lid. The saw blade snapped clean in two. Eleanor stared at the broken tool. The wolf's eye had gone glassy, unfocused. After surviving 3 days, 3 nights of killing cold, it would die now because she couldn't cut through one branch. Robert's belt. She unknotted it from her waist, good thick leather from when things were made to last. Wrapped it twice around the branch above her cut line. If she could twist it like her daddy used to do with fence wire, the wood splintered. The jack tilted sideways. The branch rolled free with a sound like thunder. The wolf didn't move. Eleanor pressed her ear to its chest, right where the ribs showed through, heartbeat there, faint as a whisper in church. The trapped leg looked like something from the butcher's reject pile bone showing white through the mess. She spread the blue tarp beside the animal. 120 pounds of dying wolf might as well be a Holstein calf. Her phone kept buzzing like an angry hornet. Eleanor grabbed the wolf's front legs, pulled. The animal's eye opened, focused on her face. No snarl, no show of teeth, just watching as she dragged it inch by inch onto the tarp. Her hip felt like somebody was driving a railroad spike through the socket. Black spots danced like gnats in her vision. She gripped the tarp corners, leaned into it like pushing a plow, pulled. 50 feet. She stopped, chest heaving like she'd run from here to the general store. The wolf's blood left a trail in the snow, dark as motor oil. 50 more feet. Her legs shook like a newborn foal's. The tarp caught on a root, jerked free. Eleanor went down hard, tailbone meeting frozen ground with a crack. Bile rose in her throat, tasting of this morning's instant Maxwell House. The wolf's eye stayed open, watching. Not dying here, Eleanor said through clenched teeth. You hear me. She got up, grabbed the tarp, pulled. The sun had climbed halfway up the sky by the time her cabin came into view. 3.5 hours since she'd found the wolf. Her mittens were soaked through with blood. Her hip had gone past pain into a strange numbness that scared her worse than the hurt. She dragged the wolf up the porch steps, thump, 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 like her mother tenderizing cube steak. Through the door into the warmth of the wood stove, through the kitchen window. She saw them. 5 people at her property line, then 7, then more. Tommy Morrison's picture spreading faster than pink eye at the elementary school. Eleanor looked at the wolf's infected leg swelling in the warmth. Black streaks running up toward its belly like poisoned veins. The pounding on Eleanor's door shook the whole frame, the kind of knocking that meant business. Not neighbors come to borrow sugar. Eleanor Walsh, Chief Dalton's voice. Same official tone his daddy used during Prohibition raids. Open this door. Legal matter. 8 o'clock. Christmas Eve. Through the frost-covered window, Eleanor counted flashlight beams cutting through the dark 20, maybe more. The whole town had turned out instead of attending candlelight service. The wolf, Luna. She'd been calling her. After the moon that hung full the night Robert disappeared lifted her head. Fresh blood seeped through the fishing line stitches Eleanor had sewn 2 hours ago. "Lie still," Eleanor whispered, pressing her palm flat against Luna's neck. The fur felt softer than she'd expected. Warm from the wood stove. A rock crashed through the kitchen window. Glass scattered across the linoleum Robert had laid their first winter, back when they thought they'd have babies crawling on it someday. That's destruction of property. Tom Morrison. Eleanor kept her voice level. Your daddy teach you that along with the mortgage business? Open up or we're coming in. Mayor Morrison himself. Tom Jr. trying to sound like his father. Got a livestock ordinance violation here. Harboring dangerous animals within town limits. Eleanor stood, her hip grinding bone on bone like a pestle in a mortar. Through the broken window, December air rushed in, carrying the smell of kerosene and pine pitch from their torches. Luna dragged herself toward the door, teeth bared, not at Eleanor, at the voices outside. Stay. Eleanor grabbed her everyday coat, the one from JCPenney, not Robert's blood-soaked barn jacket. She opened the door 6 inches, chain still on. Morrison stood on her porch in his camel hair coat from that fancy men's store in Bangor, legal papers in one leather-gloved hand. Behind him, Chief Dalton looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, hand resting on his service revolver. Margaret Henley clutched her husband, Dr. Henley's arm. The others held baseball bats, tire irons. Flashlights looked like a scene from one of those TV movies about the old days. And there, half hidden behind her daddy's legs, little Emma Dalton in her pink snowsuit with the fake fur trim. Livestock Ordinance 247.3. Morrison read, breath fogging. No resident shall harbor, keep, or maintain any wild or exotic animal deemed dangerous. It's Christmas Eve. Tom, Eleanor looked past him at Emma. You brought a child to this. Emma peered around her father's hip, eyes wide as saucers. The flashlights made her face white as typing paper. The animal comes out now, Morrison continued, or we come in and get it. From the back of the crowd, somebody sounded like the Henley. Nephew shouted, Burn the witch out! Emma gasped at the violence in that voice, stepped backward. Her pink snow boot caught the top porch step. Eleanor saw it happening like slow motion at the picture show, the child's arms windmilling like a cartoon character, the pink snowsuit flashing as she toppled backward. The crack, when Emma's head hit the concrete drainage ditch, sounded like somebody snapping kindling for the stove. Emma? Chief Dalton spun around, dropped to his knees in the dirty snow. Baby girl, can you hear me? Emma? The child lay still as a store mannequin. Blood spread under her head, darker than the slush, soaking into her blonde hair. Get back. Dalton's voice cracked. Give her air. The crowd pressed closer instead. Somebody's boot came down on Emma's mitten. Margaret Henley started screaming about calling 911. Mayor Morrison shouted for order. Pure chaos, like when the fire alarm went off during the harvest dance. Eleanor shoved the door open, breaking the chain with strength she didn't know she had left. Move all of you. Move back. She pushed through bodies, dropped beside Emma. The child's eyes had rolled back, showing white like hard-boiled eggs. Blood flowed steady from a gash above her left ear. Her breathing came in little gasps with long spaces between. Eleanor's fingers found the skull above the wound. The bone felt soft, wrong, like pressing on a bruised apple. I was an ER nurse, Eleanor said to Dalton, her hands already checking Emma's pupils, left one bigger than a dime, right one small as a pencil eraser. Before teaching, first 5 years after Robert and I married, Dalton's face went gray as February slush. Is she? Concussion? Maybe skull fracture? Eleanor stripped off her coat, wadded it against Emma's head. Blood soaked through the quilted lining fast as spilled coffee through a paper towel. She needs pressure on this wound and body heat. Now! The child's lips had gone blue as a robin's egg. A shadow fell across them. Luna stood in the doorway, dragging that infected leg like a sack of grain. The crowd scrambled backward, somebody screaming about rabies, somebody else hollering for their rifle. Luna ignored them all. She limped down the 3 porch steps and lay down against Emma's side, pressing her warm body along the child's length. "Get that thing away from her!" Margaret Henley shrieked, voice shrill as a noon whistle. Luna didn't budge, her amber eyes fixed on Eleanor, waiting like a trained collie. Eleanor kept pressure on the wound, felt Emma's skull shift wrong under her fingers like pressing on cracked china. Through the torn coat, warm blood made her hands sticky as molasses. "Ambulance," Eleanor said. "Now." Chief Dalton fumbled with his radio, hands shaking. The dispatcher's voice crackled through static. 25 minutes out. Roads are iced over bad." 25 minutes. Eleanor watched Emma's face, white as milk glass. The child's breathing had spaces between 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi too long. Luna whined low in her throat, pressed tighter against Emma. The crowd had gone church quiet. Morrison still held his legal papers, but his hands shook like leaves. Margaret Henley was praying out loud, words tumbling over each other like water over rocks. Eleanor felt Emma's pulse skip, like a record player jumping. Skip again. The child stopped breathing. Eleanor tilted Emma's head back, pinched the small nose. 2 breaths into lungs that felt too small. The little chest rose, fell, stayed still. She stacked her hands on Emma's breastbone. Compressions. Her back screamed like hot metal. 1, 2, 3. Emma's chest hitched, a wet cough, pink foam at her lips like dish soap, but breathing. Breathing. The ambulance lights painted everything red. Paramedics pushed through. What do we have? 10-year-old female. Fall with head trauma. The old training. Automatic as breathing. Lost consciousness approximately 4 minutes. Stopped breathing for 30 seconds. Possible depressed skull fracture. Left temporal. Pupils unequal but reactive. They loaded Emma quick. Chief Dalton climbing in beside his daughter. The crowd melted away like spring snow. Morrison crumpled his papers, shoved them in his pocket. Margaret Henley couldn't meet Eleanor's eyes. 3 days later, the knock was soft as moth wings. Eleanor opened to find Chief Dalton holding a paper sack from Morrison's General. His uniform looked slept in, eyes red as October apples. "Emma?" Eleanor asked. 12 stitches, moderate concussion. His voice caught like a fishhook. "She's asking about the wolf. Says Luna kept her warm." He set the groceries on the counter: milk, bread, a bottle of the expensive antibiotics from behind Phil Patterson's pharmacy counter. "This doesn't change things. The wolf has to go. When it's healed." Eleanor nodded, watched his cruiser disappear down the dirt road. Luna hadn't eaten in 2 days. Just stared at the northeast corner of the cabin, whining like a rusty gate. December 30th. Agnes Cooper's bedroom smelled like Vicks VapoRub and Endings. The old woman lay propped on feather pillows, oxygen tube hissing like a tire leak. "Saw Morrison's boy's picture of you." Agnes wheezed. "You and that wolf. The white wolves. The stories from 52. Agnes's clouded eyes went sharp as hat pins. "Papa saw them. The wolves don't come for nothing. Eleanor, they come when someone needs finding." A cough that brought up pink foam. But truth ain't always kind. Sometimes the lost don't want finding. That night at 11:47, the hospice nurse called. Agnes had passed. New Year's Eve. Luna threw herself against the door so hard the wood splintered. Eleanor opened it. Luna shot into the darkness, then stopped, looking back. Eleanor wrote on her notepad, "Following the wolf. Check the old copper mine." She didn't know why she wrote that. Something in Agnes's warning. Maybe? Eleanor's flashlight caught movement ahead. Another howl answered Luna's call, but it came from underground. Luna's white form disappeared between the black spruce, then reappeared 20 yards ahead. Eleanor's ever-ready flashlight caught her for a second before the batteries dimmed like they always did in the cold. Eleanor's hip ground with each step through the knee-deep snow. No trail here. Nobody had walked this path since the logging company pulled out in '71. Her flashlight brightened for a moment, then dimmed again, yellow as old newspaper. They passed the first no trespassing sign. Paint faded pink as medicine. The second sign had 5 bullet holes looked like Tommy Morrison and his friends used it for target practice. The third sign lay face down under a pine branch. The ground sloped down sharp. Eleanor's boot caught a root hidden under the snow. She went down hard on her side, flashlight flying from her hand. It hit a birch tree, went dark, complete blackness, like being inside a coal bin, her breathing loud as a bellows in her ears. Snow had gotten inside her collar, cold as steel against her neck, Luna's warm body pressed against her thigh. The wolf's nose nudged her hand. Get up, get up. The clouds shifted. Moonlight came through just enough to see Luna moving ahead, white against white. The sound hit first water running when everything else was frozen solid. Then the smell of copper pennies and rust, and something else. Old rot, like the root cellar after the potatoes went bad that wet spring in '98. The mine entrance appeared like a mouth in the hillside. Millbridge Copper Company, 1898 to 1952. She could just make out the carved letters. The timber frame had collapsed on the left side, warning signs hanging cockeyed. Behind dead brambles, a gap just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Luna vanished inside. Eleanor pulled out her flip phone. The battery said 3%. The little flashlight on it would die quick as a struck match. She turned it on anyway. The shaft angled down. Timber supports green with wetness despite the freeze. Her father had worked here 2 summers before it closed, said the supports were solid as oak beams in a barn. That was 70 years ago, 30 feet in. Luna sat beside something dark on the ground. A backpack, blue canvas, thick with dust. The Denver Broncos keychain still attached to little Emma Dalton had given it to Robert at the school Christmas party. For the best principal ever, she'd said, 7 years old and missing her front teeth. Eleanor's knees hit the rocky ground. The phone's weak light caught more an old Coleman sleeping bag, moldy as basement carpet, camp stove, empty cans of Campbell's soup, labels mostly gone. And there, propped against the far wall, Robert's brown leather jacket, the one she'd saved 6 months to buy for his 40th birthday, still on him, what was left of him. The skeleton sat against a timber support, skull tilted back like he'd been looking at the ceiling when he died. The wedding ring caught her phone light. She'd know it anywhere. Inside. The engraving EM to RW. Forever, 1976. A notebook lay in his lap, wrapped in a Morrison's General Store plastic bag. Eleanor's fingers were shaking so bad she could barely get the plastic open. The notebook, Robert's handwriting, pressing too hard like he always did, wearing down pencils fast as Emma went through crayons. March 15, 2004. Tom Morrison Sr. came to the house again today. 3rd visit this week. Says I need to sign off on the credit union audit. Say everything's clean. Showed me pictures Eleanor at the Stop and Shop. Eleanor at school with her students. Accidents happen. Robert, he said. Brakes fail, houses burn. March 17th. Morrison and Judge Stone are stealing. Hundreds of thousands. The previous auditor, Michael Hayes. Morrison bragged about putting antifreeze in his coffee at the Elks Lodge. Ethylene glycol, sweet taste, takes weeks to kill. March 18th. Coffee tasted sweet at poker night, like syrup. Started feeling sick driving home. Dizzy, stomach cramping. Eleanor was asleep. Didn't wake her. Threw up blood in the downstairs bathroom. Eleanor's phone flickered. 2% battery. March 19th. Can't stop vomiting. Kidneys hurt like knives. Morrison called, said it gets worse unless I cooperate. Said Eleanor gets the same if I go to police. Packed camping gear. Told Eleanor I had to check something at the credit union. If I die away from home, maybe they won't hurt her. The evidence is in her mother's piano bench. Tell Eleanor I love. The writing trailed off into scratches. Eleanor pressed the notebook to her chest. Luna whined, nudged something else a manila envelope. Photos inside. Morrison Sr. and Judge Stone at the credit union after hours. Bank statements. Everything. A branch snapped outside. Dad always said you'd find this place eventually. Tom Morrison Jr. stood in the mine entrance, flashlight blinding bright. 2 men behind him hunting buddies from the lodge. Took you long enough, Mrs. Walsh. Eleanor's phone died. Only Morrison's light now. Can't have this coming out. Morrison stepped closer. My father was a great man. The timber above his head was black with rot. Eleanor noticed. Sawdust falling from it like snow. Morrison grabbed for the notebook. The crack overhead sounded like a 12-gauge going off. Dust, thick as flour, fell from the beam above Morrison's head. Move! Eleanor shoved Morrison backward, hard. The timber crashed down where he'd been standing. The whole mine shook like a freight train passing. More dust couldn't see, couldn't breathe. Morrison's flashlight swung wild, making crazy shadows on the walls. Another crack. The beam beside Eleanor split lengthwise like firewood under an axe. Morrison lunged for the notebook again, trying to rip it from Eleanor's hands. She twisted away. Her bad hip gave out white-hot pain shooting down to her toes. The notebook flew, landing near Robert's bones. The mountain groaned. Not just one beam, now the whole ceiling shifting, settling. 70 years of weight finding its weakness. Morrison scrambled for the notebook on his hands and knees. A support post snapped like a matchstick. The chunk of ceiling that came down was big as a Buick. Morrison tried to jump back, not fast enough. The rock caught his left leg just below the knee. The sound he made wasn't a scream, more like air leaving a punctured inner tube. His flashlight spun away, beam dancing on the walls like a disco ball. Eleanor grabbed the flashlight. Morrison's leg disappeared under the boulder, blood already pooling black as motor oil. Get it off! Morrison's fingers clawed at the rock, nails breaking. Get it off me! More crashes behind them. The entrance, their only way out, disappeared under tons of rock. The flashlight beam showed solid wall where the opening used to be. Luna pressed against Eleanor's leg, ears flat against her skull, whining high in her throat. Eleanor dropped beside Morrison, grabbed his shoulders, pulled hard as she could. He screamed, then real and raw, like a rabbit in a trap. The rock didn't budge. Blood flowed steady from under it. Too much blood. Another section of ceiling dropped 10 feet away. Dust so thick she could taste it dirt and copper and 70 years of decay. Luna moved past them, nose to the ground like a bloodhound. Disappeared into the shadows at the back of the mine. Came back, bit Eleanor's coat sleeve, pulled hard. There's no other way, Morrison gasped, face white as typing paper. Dad said sealed in 52 when they closed it. Luna pulled harder, actually dragging Eleanor backward. Eleanor looked at Morrison, trapped under that rock. at the notebook lying in the dust near Robert's remains. The ceiling making sounds like knuckles cracking before a fight. She grabbed Morrison under the armpits. "Push with your good leg." "Leave me." "Push, you fool." Together, they shifted him 6 inches. The rock scraped against stone, his trapped leg twisting wrong. Morrison's eyes rolled back. He went limp as a dish rag. Luna appeared again, teeth closing on Morrison's coat collar. Between the 3 of them, old woman, wolf, unconscious man, they dragged Morrison toward the back of the mine shaft. The passage Luna had found was nearly invisible, just a crack in the wall, maybe 3 feet wide. Cold air flowed from it outside, air that smelled like pine and snow. Eleanor aimed the flashlight down the gap. It narrowed ahead to maybe 18 inches at the tightest point. Morrison came to, moaning. His foot below the crushed part hung backward, wrong as a store mannequin's. "Go," he whispered through white lips. "Save yourself." Eleanor grabbed his arms. Luna bit his collar again. They dragged him into the passage, his broken ankle catching on every rock. He bit clear through his bottom lip, trying not to scream, blood running down his chin. The passage narrowed. Eleanor's shoulders scraped both walls. Ahead, Luna squeezed through an even tighter gap, white fur disappearing into black. They reached the bottleneck. Eleanor went first, Robert's barn coat tearing on the rocks. The flashlight showed another chamber beyond, and thank the Lord, stars through a hole in the ceiling. She turned back for Morrison. His shoulders were too broad for the gap. "Turn sideways," Eleanor said. "Can't. Leg won't." Another crash from the main shaft. The whole mountain shook. Rock dust filled their passage thick as smoke. Eleanor grabbed Morrison's arms. Luna reappeared, biting his collar again. They pulled. Morrison's shoulder made a sound like celery breaking, popped clean out of the socket. He screamed, but he moved, inch by inch, through that gap, leaving skin on the rocks. The final chamber, the hole above them, 15 feet up, no way to climb with Morrison's injuries. Luna started digging at the side wall, paws already bloody from before, tearing at loose shale. Eleanor saw it, an old ventilation shaft. Mostly collapsed, but possible. They crawled. Morrison dragged himself on his belly like a soldier under barbed wire, leaving a blood trail dark as molasses. The shaft angled up. Eleanor's flashlight caught sky. They emerged behind frozen blackberry brambles, 50 yards from where they'd entered. Dawn was breaking, painting the snow pink as rose petals. Morrison collapsed in the snow. His good hand found Eleanor's coat pocket, pulled out her phone before she could stop him. "Emergency!" He gasped into it. "Eleanor Walsh tried to kill me. Old copper mine. Send everyone." The phone had just enough battery for that call. Eleanor stared at him as sirens started wailing in the distance. The handcuffs clicked cold against Eleanor's wrists. Chief Dalton's face looked like he'd aged 10 years since Christmas Eve. "Eleanor Walsh, you're under arrest for attempted murder." Luna lunged forward. Eleanor grabbed the wolf's scruff with her cuffed hands. "No. Girl. No." 2 deputies had their Smith & Wessons drawn. Morrison lay on the stretcher, legs splinted with tree branches and torn shirts, morphine already working. His eyes found Eleanor's, cold as January. "She lured me there," Morrison said to the paramedic. "Tried to kill me in that mine." A car door slammed hard. Emma Dalton stood beside her father's cruiser, white gauze wrapped around her head like a turban, wearing her mother's old wool coat that dragged in the snow. "Dad, stop. Emma, get back in the car. You're supposed to be in bed." The girl's boots crunched through the snow, each step careful. She held Eleanor's old Motorola flip phone in one mittened hand, something else in the other. Mrs. Walsh called me 2 hours ago, said to check Grandma's piano bench if something happened. Dalton's jaw went tight. Emma, Mom's old upright, the one Grandma left her when she passed. Emma's voice stayed steady as a metronome. The bench has a secret compartment. Mom showed me when I was little. Morrison tried to sit up on the stretcher. The paramedic pushed him back down. Kid's confused, Morrison said. Head injury making her... I found papers, Dad, and this. Emma pulled out an old Sony Walkman, the kind with the yellow foam headphones. It's a tape. Mr. Morrison's father talking. The paramedic working on Morrison's IV stepped back. Chief Dalton took the Walkman. His daughter pressed play. Tom Morrison Sr.'s voice filled the morning air. Tinny through the old speakers, but clear. Hayes is taken care of. Put enough ethylene glycol in his coffee to drop a horse. 3 weeks of poker nights. Doctor wrote it up as heart failure. Another voice. Judge Stone. What about Walsh? Already started. Sweet taste hides in coffee. By the time he figures it out, kidneys will be shot. If he runs, we're clear. If he talks, Eleanor has an accident. How much did they get? $400,000 just this quarter. Beautiful thing about small-town banks, nobody looks too close if the paperwork's right. The tape clicked off. Morrison lunged from the stretcher. His shattered ankle hit the ground. He howled, collapsed, started crawling toward Emma through the bloody snow. That's fake. My father would never... Chief Dalton's boot pressed down on Morrison's shoulder, pinning him. Where's the rest, Emma? Emma handed her father a manila envelope thick as a hymnal. Bank statements, canceled checks, photos of Morrison Sr. and Judge Stone at the credit union after closing, stacking money on the desk. Morrison's face went from white to gray, like ash in a dead fire. You don't understand what my father built. This whole town... Your father was a murderer, Chief Dalton said, unlocking Eleanor's handcuffs. And so are you. I never... James Hutchins, 2019. Emma read from a paper, voice clear as a church bell. Town treasurer questioned the audit discrepancies. Morrison's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Car accident, Eleanor said quiet. His brakes failed on Pine Ridge Hill. Mary Patterson, 2021. Emma kept reading. Librarian. Found old records about missing funds. House fire, Chief Dalton said. Electrical problem. They said. Morrison started laughing, high and broken, like a screen door banging in the wind. You want the truth? Half this town knew. Stone, the whole council, the bank board. The howling cut him off, not just Luna. Dozens of voices, surrounding them, through the birch trees. Eleanor counted shapes. 20 wolves, 30, more, some white as fresh cream, some gray as granite, some black as midnight. Luna stood, answered their call with a howl that raised every hair on Eleanor's arms. Morrison scrambled backward, dragging his ruined leg. No, they're not real. The stories aren't. Judge William Stone's black Mercedes crested the hill, doing 50 on the icy road. He saw the wolves, the police cars, Eleanor standing free. The car skidded sideways. 3 wolves stepped onto the road behind him, sitting patient as judges. Stone got out, hands shaking like autumn leaves. Tom, what's happening? What's going on? Morrison laughed again. Tell them, Judge, tell them about my father. Tell them about the others. Stone's hand went to his chest. He dropped to his knees in the snow. July 4th, 2025. Eleanor's fingers moved across the piano keys, the old upright from the church basement that Reverend Henley had brought over last month. Emma's smaller hands followed, finding middle C, then E, then G. The C major chord rang out through the cabin's open windows. "Better," Eleanor said. "Feel how your pinky wants to curl, let it—" 6 months since the mine. Morrison Jr. doing life without parole at the state penitentiary up in Warren, 3 counts of murder. Proved with his own daddy's records. Judge Stone's heart had given out in the ambulance. The paramedic said it was like somebody just pulled his plug. Through the kitchen window. Eleanor watched Tommy Morrison arrange folding chairs in her yard. The mayor's son, former mayor's son, working his community service every Saturday. 200 hours the judge had given him for vandalism. All those eggs and rocks through windows. He hadn't looked Eleanor in the eye yet, but he showed up. Mrs. Walsh. Emma's scar barely showed now where her hair parted funny. Why does Luna stay? Eleanor looked toward the tree line. The white wolf lay in the shade of the big oak. That infected leg healed, but scarred thick as rope. Every morning, Luna appeared at sunrise. Every evening she went back to the forest. Wild, but choosing to remain close. Maybe some soul's got unfinished business. The screen door banged open. Chief Dalton, carrying a casserole dish that smelled like his wife's famous tuna noodle. Behind him, Mrs. Dalton with her German potato salad in the same bowl she'd used for church socials since 1985. "Smells good in here," Dalton said. Strange thing, how almost losing Emma had brought the Daltons back together. They'd been separated 2 years, he'd been sleeping at the station. Now they held hands at Morrison's general store like newlyweds. Margaret Henley came next, carrying a blueberry pie with a lattice top. Her hands shook, setting it on the counter. "Eleanor, I—" The words stuck like a chicken bone. 6 months. And she still couldn't say it straight out. "Made it this morning," Margaret finally managed. "Used my mother's recipe." Dr. Henley followed with his old medical bag. Hip, feeling better. Some. Eleanor stood, demonstrating. The surgery he hadn't charged a dime had helped. She could walk to town now without stopping to rest. More cars pulled up. The fire chief, the new bank president from Augusta. Even some of Morrison's former employees, looking uncertain as cats in a new house. They'd all gotten settlement checks when the state investigated Eleanor's had been $2.3 million. She'd kept enough for the hip surgery and basic repairs. The rest went to start the Millbridge Food Bank in the old Woolworth building. Luna rose, stretched like a house cat. The children who'd thrown eggs at Eleanor's mailbox last Halloween now approached careful, hands out flat like they were feeding horses. Luna sniffed each one, patient as a grandmother at story time. She never lets them pet her. Emma observed from the piano bench. Just lets them get close enough. Tommy Morrison worked the grill, flipping burgers. His daddy's empire had crumbled like old mortar stores sold at auction. Properties divided among victims' families. Tommy lived with his aunt now, worked afternoons at Patterson's Hardware. He brought Eleanor a burger on a paper plate, eyes studying his sneakers. "Mrs. Walsh." "Thank you, Tommy." His Adam's apple bobbed like a fishing float. "My dad, he's asking to see me. Writing letters from prison." Eleanor's chest went tight. She thought of Morrison trapped under that rock, calling her a killer even after she'd saved him. "That's your choice to make, son." "Would you go, if it was your father?" Eleanor looked at Luna. The wolf watched Tommy with those amber eyes that seemed older than the forest itself. "Once," Eleanor said. "I'd go once, to say what needs saying. Then I'd let it be." The fireworks started at dusk. The volunteer fire department always did them up nice. Luna didn't run from the noise, just pressed closer to the porch where Eleanor sat. Emma leaned against Eleanor's shoulder, her mother's old Baptist hymnal open across both their laps. Chief Dalton raised his root beer he'd quit drinking after Emma's accident. "To second chances." The town raised their glasses. Eleanor's hand found Luna's scarred leg, felt the steady pulse under the white fur. Margaret Henley sat down beside them on the porch steps. My grandmother used to say the white wolves were guardian angels, sent by the good Lord to help us find our way. Luna's ear twitched. Maybe, Eleanor said, or maybe they're just wild creatures that know when someone needs finding. The fireworks reflected in Luna's eyes red and gold and blue like stained glass windows. Tomorrow, the wolf would return to the forest. Tomorrow, Eleanor would wake alone, but not lonely. Not anymore. The town had found its way back to her, one casserole at a time. Emma started playing Amazing Grace, only missing 2 notes. Eleanor closed her eyes and listened. You could hear the crickets starting up their evening concert, children laughing, and the steady breathing of a wild thing that had chosen to trust, connecting hearts. You know, friend, after sharing Eleanor's story with you, I keep thinking about my own street. The widow, 2 houses down, who I've never spoken to. The old fellow who sits on his porch every evening, always alone. We all carry stories nobody knows, don't we? 20 years, Eleanor lived with a burden that wasn't hers. 20 years eating Campbell's soup for one while her neighbors whispered behind their hands. How many Eleanors do we pass at the grocery store? Maybe the miracle isn't the wolves. Maybe it's that someone finally looked past the gossip to see the truth. Disclaimer. This story was inspired by folklore and small-town experiences, created solely for entertainment purposes. It does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence, vigilante justice, or harmful behavior toward people or animals. All characters and events in this narrative are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The portrayal of wild animals is entirely fictional. Never approach or attempt to help wild animals yourself. Always contact proper wildlife authorities. This work explores themes of redemption, community healing, and truth through fictional storytelling.